One day a coworker of mine asked me a random question.
Hey, do you know if a severe allergy can be cured overnight?
Considering I was allergic to a couple of things myself, I told him straight up that it was highly impossible. A few days after this brief conversation, I could see him starting to withdraw from others and look increasingly depressed until he eventually quit his job last month. But before he quit, I asked him a few questions like why he was quitting and what he was going to do next. That's when he told me that his wife had disappeared. The following is what he said. One day, he got home late from work and his wife wasn't there. All the lights in the house were off and it was dead silent. He went to the toilet, the lights were off and she wasn't there. Had she gone to bed? But she wasn't in the bedroom and she didn't say that she was going out that night either. The two of them lived alone in a small apartment, so there was nowhere for her to hide. So he went back to the living room, turned on the lights and the TV, and that's when he heard the door to the toilet open and shut. Startled, he turned around and saw that it was his wife that had walked out of it. But he just checked in there and she wasn't there. He asked her where she'd been and she replied she was home the whole time. She said that he had come home while she was in the bathroom. It was from this day that his wife became strange. She looked exactly the same, but something was off. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something was definitely different. 2 to 3 days later, he happened to glance over at her when she was making dinner. She was chopping up some onions. His wife had always been highly allergic to onions. It wasn't just a matter of tears streaming down her face. Her face would literally turn red and become swollen, and in order to avoid that, she always used goggles and a mask to cover her face whenever she was handling onions. Or she would simply ask him to chop it up for her to avoid touching it altogether. But this wife, the one he was watching right now, was dicing it up without a single physical reaction to it. He asked her if she was okay to chop them up, but all she did was give a crooked smile and turn back around. He started to feel suspicious about everything that his wife did from that point forward, and at the same time began questioning his own sanity. A month before he decided to quit work, his wife apparently went missing. After telling him she was going to take a bath one late evening, she never returned from the bathroom. There were no windows in there, just a small vent in the ceiling. And there were no signs of anyone having opened the front door, nor any of the windows around the apartment. He quickly called her parents home, but no one answered. In his panicked state, he somehow thought that if he went to bed and woke up the next day, that everything would be back to normal. So he jumped into his futon and forced himself to sleep. When he woke up the next day, his wife was still missing. He then tried to call her workplace, but was told that no one by that name worked there. He hurried to her parents' house, a house that he'd visited on numerous occasions, but a family he'd never seen before was living there. Apparently, they had been living there for the past 3 years. It was as if his wife had never existed. He, of course, filed a missing persons report at the police station, but when I spoke to him just before he quit, there were no developments in their search for her. In case you're thinking that maybe it was all in his head, let me just say that it caused quite a stir in our company. Although I never met his wife, others had. They remembered her because she was a cute petite woman and were saying how terrible they felt for him and were glad that they at least didn't have any children. So, can anyone help make sense of this? About 10 years ago, when I was in middle school, 4 of my friends and I decided to go explore S Mountain. I was feeling adventurous, so instead of going up the hiking trail, I walked up the rocky slopes between the trees. After a while, I came to a small clearing where there was a temple and a small house right next to it. I walked closer to the buildings when I noticed something weird. There were white clothes scattered all over the ground. You know, the types of robes that priests and shrine maidens wear. They were all caked in dirt and looked really old. I walked over to the temple, but there was no one there. The door wasn't locked either, so I looked around to see if I can steal some change from the offertory box, but it was empty. I know, I was a terrible kid. There were more clothes strewn around the box, and I saw a huge black caterpillar-like insect crawling on it, which made me shudder, and I quickly got out of there. Then I heard one of our friends screaming at us from a distance. He was yelling for us to come over and was standing by the front door of the small house, which was now open, his face drained of color. He must have gone into it. Feeling a mixture of fear and excitement, the rest of us ran over to him and followed him into the house. As soon as I did, I almost threw up. The smell was so intense and was absolutely horrible. It smelled like human excrement. My feet were frozen in place, not wanting to go any deeper into the house, but the friend who called us over grabbed me and pulled me in. The house was in a huge disarray. There were newspapers, empty liquor bottles and food scraps, underwear, dirty plates, all sorts of trash everywhere. The table was overturned and the distinction between the mounds of trash and furniture was difficult to discern. There was a calendar hanging next to the entrance, and I think the year on it was 1977, but I could be wrong. There was another room further back, and the friend who initially called us over was right at its door, beckoning us to hurry the hell up. The smell seemed to be emanating from that room because it got stronger the closer I got. It was a smell I'd never smelt before. Poo mixed with something else. I can't quite explain it. Anyway, I cautiously stepped into the room's threshold. It was really dark, but I could see that the room was in the same state as the rest of the house. A huge mess. There was what looked like a huge pot in the middle of the room that was tipped over on its side, its contents spilled onto the floor. It looked like thick, pasty miso soup. The futon closet was empty, but the wooden panels of the ceiling were broken and they were hanging down. We saw a TV and a chest of drawers, but they were all on its side as if someone had violently knocked them over. Despite the strange liquid and the hectic situation the room was in, there was something much more disturbing. The walls and windows. I couldn't see an inch of empty space because they were covered in hundreds of dirty diapers. I believe that's where the smell of feces was coming from. I gagged. I wanted to run out of there, but my other friends found this amusing. I really don't see how that's possible, and they ventured further into the room to explore. One of them picked up a dictionary that was on the floor. It was a dictionary of kanji characters, and there were little notes scribbled on the sides of the pages. They were all illegible until the very last page. I couldn't make out the name of the god, but whoever wrote it said they can now hear the voice of this specific god. A bit perplexed by it, I looked up to see another friend standing by the futon closet. He discovered a sleeping bag on the bottom shelf and was trying to pull it out, but was having a hard time because it was heavy. I was hit by a sudden thought and yelled out to him to not touch it because there was a dead body in there, and what I had just read was a suicide note. The friend jumped back, scared at my sudden loud voice. Some of the others were still curious and wanted to open the sleeping bag, but I was so freaked out by this point, and I was unable to look away from the hole in the ceiling of the closet. My heart was beating fast, and I don't know why I said it, but I screamed that someone was going to come out of that hole and ran like hell out of the house. Obviously, this freaked everyone else out, and they all began screaming and followed me out. We didn't stop running until we were more than halfway down the mountain. It took me a good while to catch my breath, but I was still in a panic. I guess my friends caught on to my emotions, and they were at a loss for words too, obviously confused by what we'd just seen. All except one. He wanted to go back to the house and see if there really was a dead body inside that sleeping bag. We obviously never went back. Not on that day anyway. We actually tried to venture back a few times, but we couldn't find the temple no matter how many times we tried, and we eventually stopped talking about it. Last year, I met up for some drinks with my friends from middle school, and naturally, our topic of conversation shifted to that day. It piqued our interest again, so we decided to try finding it one last time. We excitedly started walking up S Mountain, and lo and behold, we found that temple. We were all a bit surprised because none of us were really paying attention to where we were going. I felt a bit of fear and trepidation as we approached the clearing until we saw something that wasn't there before. There was now a black barbed wire fence surrounding the temple and the house. We walked around the fence and saw a white sign with red letters. It said, "Non-believers, stay out." We couldn't climb over the fence without cutting ourselves all over, so we gave up and walked back down the mountain. What the hell did we see back in middle school? Did those buildings belong to some crazy cult? I get scared when I think about it because we were all in that house all those years ago. It might be unrelated, but more than 10 mutilated cats have been discovered in that mountain, as well as dead people. It's all quite disturbing and creepy. I apologize for not having a proper conclusion to this story. I, myself, am still trying to figure it out. About 10 years ago, when I was a university student, I was kidnapped by a woman who lived in the same apartment complex. The woman locked me in her bathroom. She didn't tie me up, but threatened to kill me if I ever tried to run away. She kept it locked and had placed something heavy in front of the door so that I couldn't escape. Considering I wasn't hurt and I was inside the same building, I was hopeful that I'd be rescued. That didn't abate my fear though. I couldn't sleep and I had lost track of time. It came to a point where the bathroom I was stuck in seemed surreal, and I just sat inside the bathtub in a daze. While I was stuck in there, the boy I was dating at the time appeared in front of me. He asked,
"Are you okay?"
I thought I'd finally snapped and gone crazy. He continued to talk.
I think this is a dream. I'm dreaming right now. This is our bathroom.
I said to him, "Help me, I'm being held here by a woman living in the same apartment complex." He asked me which unit I was in, but I didn't know. I could only guess the floor, but I wasn't sure about that either. He informed me that 2 days had passed since I went missing and told me to hang in there and that he'd come and rescue me soon. After saying so, he opened the bathroom door and walked out, and at that point, I was sure that it was all a hallucination. I was rescued on the 3rd day. The police came to the hospital and asked me a bunch of questions, which included ones about my boyfriend. Apparently, he had contacted the police and told them that he had a dream that I was being held by someone in the same building. The police usually don't listen to such crazy stories, but after my boyfriend told them the exact room number, they decided to poke around a little bit and discovered some suspicious activity, which led to my discovery. I thought back to that hallucination I had. I didn't tell my boyfriend which unit I was in because I didn't know. So, how did he know? I decided to ask him when he came to visit me in the hospital. That's when he told me that when he was at uni, he fell down the stairs and lost consciousness. And he dreamt about me. He was talking to me in the bathroom. My hallucination, for a lack of a better word, ended when he walked out of the bathroom. But apparently, his dream continued on. After he walked out of it, he made his way out of the apartment, and after the front door shut behind him, he turned around to look at the unit number. He woke up a short while later and he jotted the room number down so as to not forget. He chuckled and wondered whether he had an out-of-body experience when he fell down the stairs. Thankfully, this strange, unexplainable occurrence overshadowed the fact that I was kidnapped and was missing for 3 days. My boyfriend eventually became my fiancé, but he passed away before we ever got married, and that has caused me a lot more trauma and sadness. He's been gone now for 3 years, and I just want to thank him for saving my life that day. You sometimes see things like this on the news, where people are walking over a railway crossing and fail to realize that a train is coming because they're busy talking on the phone. They get hit and die from the impact. It's obviously terrible for the person who dies, but also for the person on the other line. I mean, think about it. They probably hear the impact when it happens. Let's take it one step further. Imagine the person who was killed was leaving a voice message. That means whoever received that call will have a recording of the horrendous accident from beginning to end. My friend's girlfriend, let's just refer to her as B, has an experience like that. Below is what she told me. One of B's friend was leaving her a voicemail when she got hit by a train. The accident occurred at a common railroad crossing with only a warning signal and no gates. The plan was for her to go sleep over at B's house the next day, but due to a change in schedule, she had to delay her time of arrival, so she was leaving a message to let B know when she got hit by the train. You could hear the faint warning signal of a train approaching and her friend saying,
"Oh, hey, it's me. I'm going to be a bit late tomorrow, maybe about an hour."
And then a crashing sound. When B got home, she listened to the voicemail without knowing what had happened and flinched at the sudden crashing sound in the middle of her sentence that ended the message altogether. B tried to call her back, but her phone went straight to voicemail, so she called her house, and that's when she was told that her friend had been in an accident, that she had died on impact. Although it felt morbid to save the voicemail, B couldn't bring herself to delete it because it was the only way to hear her voice now that she was gone. But in saying that, she didn't play it until a whole year later, on the same day her friend passed away. She had decided to take her mobile phone to the temple afterwards to have it blessed before deleting it for good. When she listened to it for the second time ever, she noticed something strange that she hadn't a year before. The warning signal was already beeping when the voicemail began. That means it had started going off before her friend even made the call. So, how could she not hear it? When B told me this story, it was after she had deleted the message, so I can only go off of what she told me. But apparently, there was one other thing that disturbed her. She said, the time it took for her to say those initial words in the crash was really short. Usually when the warning signal starts clanking, there's a bit of time before the train actually crosses. But in the message, it was only a matter of a few seconds. So, the only logical explanation to all of this is that her friend called just before or just as the warning signal started ringing. After hearing B's phone say,
"Please leave a message after the beep,"
her friend began talking and timed everything so that she walked onto the crossing just as the train approached. It's the only thing that makes sense, but it's something that we will never know for sure.